You are shattering your own spirit to keep your family comfortable, trapped in the same silent ocean where your mother drowned her dreams and called it devotion. You have been taught that love means disappearance, that if you stop being the anchor, everyone sinks. But what if that very belief is the chain drowning you all? She spent 2 decades saying yes until her soul screamed no, then walked away from the sinking ship with the courage to be called selfish. What she discovered will challenge everything you believe about loyalty, that your so-called abandonment was actually the lifeboat that saved everyone, and that breaking your mother's curse didn't destroy the family. It finally gave them permission to swim. Her name was Elena, though it could have been yours. She was 34 years old, sitting in a fluorescent-lit emergency room at 3 in the morning, convinced she was dying. Her chest had seized during her sister's birthday dinner. Not a gentle flutter, but a vice grip that bent her double over the lasagna she'd spent 6 hours preparing because her mother's recipe had to be perfect, had to be exactly right, had to prove she cared enough to suffer. The monitor beeped steady. Her heart was fine, but her soul was screaming. Therefore, the doctor asked if she'd been under stress, and Elena laughed until she sobbed because stress was her love language, the only dialect she'd been taught to speak fluently. She had spent 2 decades converting her own boundaries into fuel for other people's comfort. The 2 a.m. phone calls from her brother about his marriage, she answered, every time, her voice honeyed with concern while her own marriage crumbled from neglect. The rent she covered for her father, just this month, for 15 straight months. She paid it from her savings account, the one meant for her own house, never mentioning the overdraft fees. The career she abandoned because her mother needed help with the house after the knee surgery, and then after the hip surgery, and then just because she was lonely. She called it devotion, but here's the microaggression she never named until that hospital gurney. She could disappear completely, evaporate into the wallpaper, and her family would simply adjust the lighting, never noticing the ghost in the room, never questioning who cleaned the ghost's ectoplasm off the floor. Therefore, her body became the archive of every unspoken no, storing the debt in her locked jaw, her frozen shoulders, her inability to sleep without pharmaceutical assistance that turned her dreams into static. You think this is just about toxic families. You think this is about cutting people off, about going no contact, about being the villain they already suspect you are. But what if I told you this is actually about inherited architecture, about blueprints drafted in trauma and passed down like sacred heirlooms? Elena's grandmother had laundered her husband's shirts at midnight after 12-hour factory shifts, humming hymns about how sacrifice was holy, how a woman's glory was invisible labor. Her mother had swallowed her admission letter to art school to start working at the insurance office when her own father fell ill, calling deferred dreams a season of life that lasted 40 years until the seasons became decades and the decades became a life. The women in this lineage didn't have personalities, they had functions, they were appliances with hearts. But Elena found the photo albums last spring, stuffed in a rotting cardboard box behind her father's old tax returns in the garage, coated in dust and neglect. Therefore, she saw the ghost chain with devastating clarity. Her mother at 22, eyes bright as exploding stars, holding a paintbrush by the lake. Then her mother at 35, eyes like closed blinds, vacuuming the same patch of carpet in a loop. The transition happened exactly where Elena was now, at the precise intersection of service and suicide. The math was brutal, a calculation that made her stomach drop. 2 generations of women had treated their own desires as clutter to be organized out of sight, as inconvenient noise to be muted for the greater good. But Elena had believed, faithfully, religiously, that she could outlove the pattern, that her sacrifice would be the one that finally fixed them, that she could be the anchor so solid, so immovable, so permanently fixed to the ocean floor that the whole family ship would finally sail smooth, would finally stop rocking, would finally be peaceful. She was wrong. She was catastrophically wrong. Therefore, the panic attack at the dinner table wasn't a malfunction of her biology. It was the first honest thing her body had said in 20 years, the only truth she couldn't filter through the lens of politeness. You need to understand what happened next because this is where most stories get it twisted, where Hollywood lies to you about empowerment. She didn't have a cinematic moment of strength. She didn't stand up in the restaurant and deliver a polished speech about boundaries that made everyone applaud and nod with sudden understanding. She didn't flip a table or become a meme. Instead, she went home, closed her bedroom door, and turned off her phone. But the guilt arrived like a second heartbeat, thrumming in her temples with a frequency that said she was killing her family by withdrawing, that love meant showing up even when you were bleeding out, that her absence was violence against people who needed her. Therefore, she sat in the dark for 3 days, not meditating, not journaling, not practicing self-care with scented candles and green tea, just existing in the terrifying silence of her own unoccupied mind, waiting for the world to end, waiting for the phone calls to turn into ambulances, waiting for the catastrophe her family had trained her to expect. It didn't come. Her brother called his actual therapist instead of her. Her father discovered the bank had been auto-paying the electric bill all along. He didn't need her to call the company. He just needed to read his own mail. Her mother showed up at the door on day 4 with soup in a Tupperware container. But she didn't barge in with her key. She knocked. She waited. Therefore, Elena opened the door to a woman she'd never met. Her mother, afraid, small, uncertain of her welcome, asking instead of demanding. This is the moment the curse began to crack, the hairline fracture that would eventually split the foundation. Her mother sat on the couch and looked at the dust on the coffee table. Dust Elena hadn't cleaned because she couldn't move because she was underwater, and said, "I thought if I stopped holding everything up, we'd all fall. I thought if I let go for 1 second, the whole sky would crash down." She wasn't angry about the unanswered calls. She wasn't wounded by the boundary. She was relieved. She was exhausted. But here is the hidden cost nobody talks about when we discuss breaking generational cycles. When the anchor suddenly swims away, everyone left on the boat realizes they've been wearing life jackets the whole time. They just needed permission to zip them up. They just needed to see that swimming was possible. Elena didn't fix her family. She didn't heal generations of dysfunction with one boundary, didn't transform them into emotionally intelligent beings overnight. Some patterns persisted, some phone calls still went unanswered for too long, but she did something more subversive than fixing them. She became visible. She occupied space without apologizing for the room she took up. Therefore, something shifted in the geometry of her bloodline, a tectonic plate moving beneath the surface. Her niece, watching from the doorway during that soup conversation, saw 2 women choosing honesty over performance, choosing breath over duty. That image replaced the inherited instruction manual. That moment became the new template. 6 months later, Elena wakes up without dread pooling in her stomach like sour milk. She still loves her family, but she loves them as a participant in the dance, not as the floorboards, not as the infrastructure holding up the ceiling. Her mother started painting again. Watercolors, messy and bright, landscapes that look nothing like the insurance office where she spent her life. Her father asks questions now, instead of making demands, tentative and strange. The phone still rings, but Elena chooses whether to answer. And when she does, she doesn't perform exhaustion to prove her love. She just listens. And when she says no now, the sky doesn't fall. It clears. The air becomes breathable. You are waiting for permission. You are waiting for your family to release you, for the guilt to evaporate like morning fog, for some external signal that it's safe to stop drowning, that you've sacrificed enough to earn the right to breathe. But here is the truth that will either free you or indict you. Nobody is coming to cut your chains because they don't see them. They see your strength and they mistake it for infinite capacity. They see your silence and they mistake it for contentment. Therefore, the only way out is through the terror of being called selfish, of being the villain in a story that was never supposed to be about you anyway, of letting them feel the weight they forgot you were carrying. Your mother didn't know she was teaching you to disappear. She thought she was teaching you to survive in a world that demanded women's disappearance as the price of safety. She thought she was giving you the tools for a happy life, not realizing the tools were actually shackles disguised as jewelry. But survival without selfhood is just a slower death, and you've been dying beautifully for years, performing vitality while you calcify inside. Therefore, stop. Not because they deserve your absence, not because you're punishing them, but because you deserve your presence. The water is deep, the current is strong, But you were never meant to be the anchor holding the ship in harbor, trapping it in safe stagnation. You were meant to swim, and when you finally dive, when you cut the rope and move through the water, watch how quickly they realize they can swim too. The curse breaks not when you save them, but when you save yourself and let them see that it's possible, that the ocean supports all swimmers, not just the ones who drown. Stop holding the water still. Take the first stroke. Watch the ripples become waves that carry everyone forward, and realize that your freedom was their permission all along.